It's a scheduled day off for the Denver Broncos, which means it's time to talk about our next favorite team, which is our fantasy football team. In this video, we hop over and we talk with Kyle Yates, who is truly like one of the smartest fantasy dudes I've ever met. We talk about hidden Denver Broncos gems. He's got an amazing national perspective, and my biggest takeaway is just how much the national media is sleeping on this team. There's a huge difference between upside and potential and being actually bad. And I think the Denver Broncos, while we don't have any proven talent, there are so many dudes on the Denver Broncos who I think could win you your league because you will get them late. That's what I plan on doing this year. And either we will be triumphing together as we win our league by picking up some of these fantasy sleepers, or we will be curled up on a ball under that hoop and just like trying to pretend like we never believed in what this team has. But here it is, Kyle Yates, my man. Kyle Yates on the line with us here. You got at least 80,000 followers on Twitter who live and die on your fantasy advice, man. But can you tell the audience what you do, where you write, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So for people who are familiar with my work, you know that I was on Fantasy Pros for several years there, doing the main podcast there, and then have stepped out and have done a couple different ventures here, but am back out on my own, which is super, super fun, super exciting to be able to just kind of get to do fantasy football content the way that I want to. And so I just running this on my own. You can find me over on Twitter at Kyle Y NFL, and then over on Instagram as well at Yates Fantasy Football.
How many leagues are you currently competing in?
Ooh, definitely cut back several years ago. So I think now I'm at probably about 7 or 8 as the max. But there was a point where it was definitely into the double digits.
Oh my goodness, man. All right. Correct me as like a kind of novice fantasy player. My strategy, tell me if this is good or not, is just to load up on as many Denver Broncos as possible and hope that gets me some dubs. Is that a good strategy?
Hey, I will say probably not the best strategy in the past couple years or into this year as well. If you have taken that strategy, you probably have not won your league, just given the state of the Denver Broncos roster. So this year, I think there's some gems, though. I think we'll get to them, but I think there's some gems here on this roster that we can talk about from a fantasy perspective.
Perfect. Yeah. Let's dive into that. So like who are I guess what it would the national perspective be around the Denver Broncos when it comes to fantasy and the players who have are jumping into that higher average draft position, whether it be in a dynasty league or you want to win it right now.
Yeah, I think that the main teams that have this reputation of consistently winning, right? You're looking at the San Francisco 49ers, the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously the two teams that were in this last Super Bowl. But then you go into the Buffalo Bills. Like there's those top teams, there's massive excitement to get those players, right? Because the good teams are going to score a lot of points, which means a lot of points for your fantasy players, your fantasy roster. So I think there's a lot of hype and excitement around those players. But then as we go further down, and I can say this as a Chicago Bears fan myself, that, these rosters that have not been good in recent years, there's sort of this lack of excitement. There's not this like shiny appeal to them, if that makes sense. And the Denver Broncos certainly have been a team where they have not been towards the top of the league for several years now. So when we look at the national perspective on the Broncos this year from a fantasy standpoint, yeah, there's a couple players that we can get excited about. But at the same time, it's not like there's a clear running back one on this roster in this depth chart. It's not like there's a super clear wide receiver one that we know is going to be dominant the way that other wide receiver ones in, we'll call them poor or average offenses, will operate as well. So there's a lot of ambiguity that we have to sift through. But if we do take the right shots on these players, it can lead to fantasy production.
Yeah, 100%, man. So you're hitting the nail right on the head. Like we don't know who our wide receiver one is because Cortland Sutton may even hold out from training camp, which is just around the corner here. We don't even know if he's going to be back. Can Mims take his Pro Bowl berth that he had last year as a punt returner and convert that as he's now running Jerry Jeudy's routes? What's Troy Franklin going to look like? And really, it's like I think a ton of high upside players, but no proven number one at all of those. But I think there's a difference in being unproven and being bad. It's just like really a gamble as you do that. So knowing that the Broncos have a lot of rookies or unproven people on this team, if you were making a fantasy draft on a rookie, type of rookie can step in and have production? Like, what position would you feel most comfortable taking, like a rookie quarterback or a rookie receiver, a rookie running back? Who usually steps in and has the best chance at success?
Yeah, if we're taking that zoomed out approach, I think that the rookie running back is probably the easiest for that step into production, where we've seen historically that rookie running backs are able to step into the NFL and produce right away. Uh, However, in recent history, we have seen these wide receivers that have come out. I mean, instant production from guys like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CD Lamb. Like the list just goes on and on of these wide receivers where typically we would have had to wait a few years for them to produce in a big way. And that's simply no longer the case. So I think that you can find in the right situation, you can find some of these wide receivers that are ready to produce right away. The quarterback, the tight end, those are ones where it's rare for them to produce right away from a fantasy standpoint. From the quarterback specifically, you got to have the rushing upside to be able to produce.
So yeah, with that being said, knowing that we had 6 first-round quarterbacks drafted, one of them to your team who may or may not paint his nails, what rookie quarterback drafted in the first round, like, would you be most confident in drafting from a fantasy standpoint?
Yeah, I definitely think Caleb Williams is at that top of the list, not necessarily because of what he brings to the table by himself, which is certainly worthy of that number 1 overall selection, but it's more so because of the situation that he's walking into. I mean, can we remember a rookie quarterback stepping into a better situation from a fantasy standpoint or from an NFL standpoint? You've got
No way.
DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze as your 3 wide receivers. Like, that's just absolutely insane to think about. So Caleb Williams is certainly at the top of the list. That next rookie quarterback that I am willing to take a chance on from a fantasy standpoint in year 1 and ranking them around that quarterback 15 range. If you want to wait on quarterback, I'm fine taking the chance on Jaden Daniels, the quarterback for the Washington Commanders out of LSU. And we saw what he did for guys like Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. this past year as he won the Heisman Trophy. Like, his rushing ability, he takes certainly some risky gambles and he puts his body into some situations that are going to get him absolutely crushed in the NFL. So he's got to work on that. But that level of athleticism and shiftiness is like Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson brings another gear to him, but what he's going to be able to do, I wouldn't be shocked if we see 600 rushing yards from Jaden Daniels in year 1. And if that is the case, then that is going to be a guy who's going to be a consistent fantasy producer for your lineup, no matter what it looks like from a passing perspective.
Man, imagine if they did somehow land a Brandon Ayuk trade who was trying to get there and he's got some production there. That could be crazy. What are your fantasy thoughts on Bo Nix and why should he be my first overall draft selection?
I'm not going to say that he should be your first overall draft selection. I feel like that'd be giving out some poor advice there. But I do think that Bo Nix has in this, I mean, it's going to the greater conversation of what has Sean Payton been looking for since the retirement of Drew Brees at quarterback. And when Sean Payton took a step back from the New Orleans Saints and then moved over to the Denver Broncos, just hasn't been able to replicate the success that he had with Drew Brees, which is a very, very quick internal processor and someone who is able to deliver the ball accurately. And in Sean Payton's quick passing game scheme, that's what you need. Now, is Bo Nix all of that? Or am I saying that Bo Nix is going to be Drew Brees? I'm sure that you would love to hear me say that. I'm not going to say that, but I'll
say that.
Okay. All right. There we go. Someone said it on this show. I do think that he has the skill set that Sean Payton is looking for to execute his scheme. And that is what we see with a lot of these coaches is like, I have the know it all. I have the wherewithal to be able to say this is how we win in the NFL. I just need the players that can execute what I want to do. And so I think Nix, with his experience in college football, is going to be able to step in there and really, really succeed from that perspective. Now it goes to the conversation that we had at the beginning of the show, which is, what does the running back room look like? Who exactly is Bo Nix throwing to? It's not like he's throwing to Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore, right? So that is the other part of this where Nix can be productive because he fits what Sean Payton wants, but now might be held back a little bit because you're probably going to have Josh Reynolds as your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1, whereas a lot of NFL teams would like to have Josh Reynolds as a wide receiver 4 rotational guy, right? He can get the job done, but he doesn't bring that elite upside.
Yeah. You mentioned Keenan Allen specifically, so let's go with some other teams in the AFC West. How have the fantasy projections for a Herbert changed, knowing that he went from having like some beast wide receivers playing Keenan Allen 2 times a year? you are insanely lucky to have him as a Bears fan now, and to get him for a fourth round pick is just a steal. So to lose him and Austin Eckler, and to lose Mike Williams and a starting center, how have the projections of where Herbert is being drafted in most fantasy leagues changed?
Yeah, it's changed in a massive way. And it's not only just the drop off of the supporting cast, it's also the fact that he's got a completely new system that's coming in that is so run heavy and run centric that we could see 150 less pass attempts for Justin Herbert this year than what we have become used to in the past. And that's not great from a fantasy perspective when Justin Herbert doesn't bring the rushing ability that a Lamar Jackson brings, that a Josh Allen, right? He can move, but he's not going to be utilized in that capacity that Lamar Jackson was in this scheme in Baltimore. So, with that being said, Justin Herbert falls out of the top 12 of quarterbacks this year. I don't know how he doesn't, because when you have the drop off, then when you combine that, the scheme, the drop off of no Mike Williams, no Keenan Allen, he's going to be throwing to Josh Palmer. And listen, don't get me wrong, I love Ladd McConkey. I think Ladd McConkey is an absolute steal from a fantasy perspective this year, where he's going in drafts right now, but he's unproven. Joshua Palmer, DJ Chark, and Ladd McConkey are going to be your starting three wide receivers. Maybe Quentin Johnston can crack the top three, but that's not exactly boding super well for Justin Herbert's prospects going into this year.
Heading over to Vegas in our AFC West whip around here, what are the Davante Adams implications? Who do you think is going to be actually throwing the ball to him? And does the fact that he does not have somebody to throw the ball to him change where he is being drafted? Obviously, he's an elite wideout. What are your thoughts on the Raiders from a fantasy perspective this season?
Yeah, I think that it's somewhat more of the same of what we saw towards the tail end of last year. And that is, I think Aiden O'Connell is going to get the first crack at this job. And we saw that Davante Adams can be a fine fantasy asset with that, right? It's going to be that they are featuring him as the main weapon there. And really, as you look at the rest of that depth chart, it's not like there's going to be another guy that's going to suddenly step forward and really take away the targets from Davante Adams. So I think it's going to be one of these things where Davante Adams is going to push probably for the lead league in targets. He'll be great from a reception standpoint. Maybe the yardage will be towards the top of the league, but then we could see those touchdowns falter and fall a little bit below the expectation, which is going to hold him back from a fantasy standpoint. So I have Davante Adams right in that low end wide receiver 1 range from a fantasy standpoint, where he's that wide receiver 10, 11, 12, where you're in a full PPR format where you're going to know exactly what you're going to get week in and week out. Yeah, for sure. Take him in that range. The touchdowns are what's going to hold him back, I think.
How about tight end? When the Broncos were on the board, everyone were kind of torn. Like, do we get Bo Nix here? Or do we go get the generational tight end in Brock Bowers? But then there've been a lot of times where people have said, hey, this is a generational tight end who's kind of flamed out or taken a longer time to hit. Can a rookie step up and have a good year as a tight end from a fantasy standpoint? Do you think Brock Bowers has the capability of doing that?
Yeah, I definitely think the talent is there. The athleticism is there, certainly for Brock Bowers to be one of the better tight ends, if not the best tight end in the NFL within a couple of years. The question is just, what are the expectations for Brock Bowers, right? Where, I mean, expectations determine how we view a player succeeding or not. So if we're saying Brock Bowers is going to be a top 3 tight end in his rookie season, and that's the consensus expectation, it's like, that is a very, very high mark for him to hit. However, and he finishes tight end 6, tight end 7 from a fantasy standpoint, we're like, it's major disappointment. He didn't do very well. But if we set those expectations as he's tight end 6, tight end 7, and he finishes there, it's like, that was a good rookie year. So I think that's really just sort of the way that we need to view Brock Bowers going into this year, is where's the realistic range for him to finish? And I have him a little bit further down in that tight end 6, 7, 8 territory, where, guys like Evan Ingram in Jacksonville probably going to see a ton more work than Brock Bowers. And I trust the quarterback play more in Jacksonville than I do in Las Vegas. So I'm going to go with Evan Ingram there. Kyle Pitts, the production certainly hasn't been there over his first couple of years. We saw it in his rookie year, and it's taken a little bit but the situation is dramatically different now in Atlanta than it was. Yeah. Kirk Cousins there now, Zach Robinson as the head coach and play caller. Like, Kyle Pitts could absolutely explode this year. So I see more of a ceiling for Pitts this year than Bowers. I'm going to go Pitts, where the talent and athleticism actually is probably more in Pitts' favor than it is even in Bowers. We were talking about Pitts as one of the best prospects to come out at the tight end position several years ago. And so I'll lean more towards it's just more of let's adjust the expectations, make sure that they're in check. If we're talking about Bowers as a top 3 tight end, he's probably going to fall short of those expectations and we'll view his rookie year as a failure. If we view him in that tight end 6, 7, 8 range, I think he can easily finish there.
Talking about stud tight ends, there's a stud tight end who just gets older every year and is now on a Taylor Swift Eras tour. Just tell me that the end is near for Travis Kelce and the Kansas City Chiefs. That would sound really good if you could just say that, and I'll clip it and put it everywhere. Do you think Travis Kelce is going to fall off a cliff from a production standpoint anytime soon?
It's the emotions that you're going through right now are exactly what I have gone through for my entire childhood with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. That's exactly it. It's like, just tell me when this inevitable drop off is going to happen, right? Just tell me when, because it keeps happening every single year. And then they get Jordan Love, and so it's great. No, I think that Travis Kelce, we've been waiting for that drop off. We've been waiting for that drop off in production from him, for him to fall off the age cliff for 3-4 years now, and over that time frame, he continues to finish as a top 2, top 3 fantasy football tight end. Like you can go back and look at his production and you just go year by year and you're like, top 2, Travis Kelce, top 2, Travis Kelce, top 2. And it just keeps going all the way through like 2016, something like that. So listen, I would love to bet against Travis Kelce. I would love to bet against the Kansas City Chiefs. Even I'm getting a little bit tired of seeing them win consistently year in and year out. But until we see it happen, I'm not going to go against Travis Kelce.
Man, this is the worst. Okay, well, give me some good news here. Tell me Russell Wilson is just cooked and bad, and he's not going to be successful with the Pittsburgh Steelers. What's the outlook for the skill positions in Pittsburgh now that they have Russell Wilson as their quarterback, and where's he falling in your average draft position?
Yeah, I think that there's a ton of unknown even with Russell Wilson, because is Russ actually the quarterback 1 in Pittsburgh? I think that's going to be a battle sooner than later, which is crazy for us to fast forward from just a few years ago where we were talking about Russell Wilson as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And for him to drop off as significantly as he has, it's definitely tough to see because we loved what Russell Wilson was doing from a fantasy standpoint. So in Pittsburgh, the scheme with Arthur Smith and what he's done in the past, there's question marks. There's just question marks galore there, because even outside of George Pickens at the wide receiver position in Pittsburgh, it's like, can you tell me who their wide receiver 2 is? Because I don't know who it's going to be, right? We're looking at guys like Calvin Austin as stepping up into that wide receiver 2 role. Roman Wilson, a 3rd-round pick from this year. There's just a ton of unknowns there in that system and scheme where I just don't know if that's the supporting cast that's going to suddenly bring back Russell Wilson to fantasy football relevance or stardom.
Yeah, I mean, I had as high hopes as anybody, and I just think he's not the Russell that we saw those years in Seattle, and that's totally going to be interesting to see what happens with the Steelers, and they are playing here at the Denver Broncos week 2, so that's going to be a game to circle and highlight for sure. Who would you say, like, the Denver Broncos have these 3 rookies we're super high on, with Audric Estime out of Notre Dame, just this bowling ball of a running back who people say is the most powerful running back to come into the league over the past 20 years. Troy Franklin being Bo Nix's favorite target at Oregon, and then Bo Nix. Of those 3 rookies, who do you think you would feel most comfortable drafting to your dynasty fantasy league?
Yeah, I think even despite the lower draft capital, I think it's Troy Franklin. For me, I had Troy Franklin from a tape perspective and evaluation standpoint much, much higher. Now he comes into the NFL Combine and he had gotten sick right beforehand, so he dropped some weight and then obviously was not at 100%, so he didn't run. Even looking at his 40-yard dash, which was still fast, even with looking at that, I was still surprised to see that it was low. I expected him to run in the 4.3s, if not the 4.2s. And the connection there with Bo Nix, I don't think that you have to worry about him suddenly developing chemistry. Now it's just a matter of the role that he's going to be put into. Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin are going to kind of do similar things from a role perspective. So can you beat out Marvin Mims? Is Mims going to get that first chance? I'm willing to bet on the talent there. I was lower on Audric Estime from a talent standpoint going into the NFL draft. I was much higher on Troy Franklin. So I'll be more willing to take the chance on Franklin going into my dynasty draft.
And then at the tight end position, we have, we have Dulcich, who, when he was healthy, man, was a playmaking tight end. And there was certainly drives there where he was catching every ball on a 90-yard drive against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And so then Sean Payton's really been talking up this dude named Lucas Kroll. Who do you have as the number one tight end on the team? And then where do they fall in your tight end rankings, knowing that Sean Payton loves the tight end position, from Jeremy Shock? I mean, you can just list all the tight ends he's coached.
Yeah, I think that Troutman's probably going to get the first chance, but at the same time, like we heard last year, Sean Payton talking up Greg Dulcich, saying that he was going to be in the Joker role in the offense, and then Dulcich did next to nothing. So I think that it's really like Troutman probably, but also I don't know if it really matters from a fantasy standpoint, if that makes sense, where it's like that role is probably going to be a rotational role. As the tight end one, you'll have different tight ends that come onto the field and different, blocking tight ends, to then these move tight ends that are moved in motion pre-snap. So I think there are different roles that you're going to see these guys occupy that it's probably not going to lead to consistent fantasy production.
Well, I think Lucas Kroll is him, and it's going to be amazing, but it also could be very, very heartbreaking. So I let some of my friends know that I got a chance to talk to you, and I was like, hey, what questions should I ask? And got a ton of questions in. They all want to know who is somebody across the NFL that nobody's talking about that is going to win you your fantasy football league this year.
Oh my goodness. All right, putting me on the spot in a major way. I think that a guy that I just released a video. I'll give you two names. Okay, so I just released a video over on my Twitter and on Instagram that you can find. A sleeper wide receiver that's going off the board is wide receiver 69 right now in Sleeper's ADP, so way further down the board. Dontavian Wicks, rookie wide receiver last year for the Green Bay Packers. At the tail end of the year was just absolutely fantastic from a fantasy standpoint, and I think he's going to have a much larger role here going into 2024. So flying completely under the radar right now, Dontavian Wicks, the wide receiver for the Packers. And then another guy to keep an eye on is the rookie running back for the Buffalo Bills, Ray Davis, out of Kentucky. Was moved all over the formation, which you typically do not see for college running backs. He was lining up out wide and running deep routes, and then is just a bowling ball of a runner where he can bang it out in between the tackles. I think he's going to be the goal line back for the Buffalo Bills. They've been searching for this role for several years and been trying to utilize guys like Leonard Fournette and Latavius Murray at the tail ends of their career. Ray Davis, I think he's going to push James Cook for some significant snaps here in year one, and he is absolutely flying under the radar as well. So Ray Davis and Dontavian Wicks, there's two names for you.
Money back guarantee right there. That's why they come for those takes. Love it. Who is a player everyone's talking about in the first round that is going to be a bust? I remember a couple of years I had the first pick and I picked Todd Gurley, and I don't think he played a single snap. He fell off a cliff real fast. So who would you predict being that player who's drafted really high, who's going to be a total bust?
Yeah, it's difficult to say with any sort of certainty, right? If they were going to be a total bust, they wouldn't be going in the first round of fantasy drafts in consensus, right? So I think that a player that I am a little bit lower on than consensus, this player has now moved up into the top 10 of wide receivers, is Marvin Harrison Jr., the rookie wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals. And listen, I love Marvin Harrison Jr. I love his talent. I think that he's going to be really, really good. For him to return that top 10 production right out of the gate, especially going above some of the other names that are around him in that ADP, is pretty significant. So I am more willing to let someone else take the chance on Harrison. I've got him just outside of the top 12 wide receivers. So we're talking a 4 or 5 wide receiver player gap there. So Marvin Harrison Jr. is a name to just pump the brakes on a little bit. I'm not saying completely avoid him at all costs, but let's just pump the brakes.
Yeah, I mean, in a dynasty league, I could see wanting to get him at the ground level, but man, if you're trying to win right now, all right, so that can get us to our quick hitting fantasy questions here for you. So a lot of times I feel judged because I do what Bill Simmons calls the nose picker league, which is like you just are doing a normal. What is the purest kind of fantasy there is? So you got dynasty, you got auction leagues, you got normal leagues, you got daily fantasy. What in your mind is like the purest form of NFL fantasy football?
Yeah, I loved normal fantasy football, the redraft fantasy football when I got into it. And then someone introduced me to Dynasty, and I haven't looked back since that point. So Dynasty is definitely that path where if you get the right group of guys together where they are, or the group of people together where they are all interested from, year round, and they're sending trade offers year round, and there's a ton of engagement, man, that is just, it's a ton of fun where you get the enjoyment of that, September to December for fantasy football normal push, but then you get that year round. So I will say Dynasty.
I am in one dynasty league that has all Denver Broncos players, but I agree. It's like the camaraderie and the year-long text thread that kind of goes along with that. So, and then last question, we'll let you run on this. What I'm sure you get on Twitter, all the hilarious punishments for losing your league. What is your all-time favorite punishment or reward for winning your league? Maybe both of them. What's your favorite punishment you've seen and best reward for winning your league?
Yeah. I think that there's, the classics of the 24-hour Waffle House stay where you gotta, if you eat a waffle, then it takes an hour off your time. Then there's the more severe of you got to get a tattoo. I certainly have tattoos, and I am not willing to put that on my body, so that's a little bit too extreme for me. I think the best one that I've seen was someone that certainly does not know how to play the saxophone, but had to go out in a town square and play the saxophone and have like one of the, the buckets in front of them. And they had to play until they raised like $5, $10, whatever the case was. So, trying to play a saxophone and raise money in a public place and just absolutely humiliate yourself, because I would not know what in the world to do when I pick up a saxophone. That is one that I have seen that I think is a pretty good one.
I just saw one, I think it was at the Mall of America in Minnesota, and they so there's like a ton of people, and they were like playing the cymbals, and it was just the most cringe thing I'd ever seen in my life, and I loved it, so I'll shoot it to you on Twitter.
Sounds great.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much. Remind our listeners one more time where they can go, or our viewers, to where they can go to learn more from and with you.
Yeah, for sure. You can find me over on Twitter at Kyle NFL, and then over on Instagram at Yates Fantasy Football. Also over on YouTube as well, youtube.com/Yates Fantasy Football.
I'm telling you right now, if Greg Dulcich stays healthy, he is going to be a problem, and Marvin Mims is going to be one of the leaders in the league this year in yardage. So pick both of those. Here is the money back guarantee that I will keep to all of you. There's not a Waffle House anywhere near my house, but I will take the Waffle House challenge, and I will lock myself in a Waffle House, and I will live stream for 24 hours, and you guys can decide what I need to eat to get out of there if the Denver Broncos do not win more than 7 games. I guarantee it. It's going to happen. Pick up Mims, pick up Greg Dulcich, and we'll be good, because you can believe.